Right now, as you're watching this video, there are approximately 2.4 billion people on this planet, unknowingly destroying the most important organ system they didn't even know they had. I'm talking about your microbiome, the 39 trillion bacterial cells living inside your digestive tract that outnumber your own human cells and control far more of your health than you could possibly imagine.
Here's what most people don't understand. You are not just a human being. You are a walking ecosystem, a universe of microorganisms that determines whether you develop cancer, whether your brain functions properly, whether you feel anxious or calm, whether you gain weight or stay lean, and whether you live to 90 or die at 55. And there are 5 common habits, things you probably did this morning, that are systematically exterminating these bacteria at a rate that scientists are now calling a mass extinction event happening inside the human body. The 5th habit on this list is something that 78% of health-conscious people do religiously, believing it's protecting their health, when in reality, it's doing the exact opposite. But before I tell you what these 5 habits are, I need you to understand something that will change the way you think about your body forever. Your gut bacteria are not passengers. They are not neutral residents just hanging out in your intestines. They are active, intelligent, chemical-producing factories that create over 90% of your body's serotonin, the neurotransmitter that regulates your mood. They produce vitamin K2, which prevents arterial calcification and keeps your heart healthy. They manufacture short-chain fatty acids that feed the cells lining your colon and prevent colorectal cancer. They regulate your immune system, controlling whether it attacks invaders or attacks your own tissue in autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and multiple sclerosis. A groundbreaking study published in Nature Medicine in 2019 followed 11,000 people across 4 continents for over a decade. What they discovered was stunning. People with the most diverse gut microbiomes had a 47% lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes, a 34% lower risk of cardiovascular disease, and a 52% lower risk of clinical depression compared to those with depleted microbiomes. This wasn't about genetics. It wasn't about income. It was purely about the diversity and health of their gut bacteria. But here's the crisis we're facing right now. Since 1950, the average human gut microbiome has lost approximately 40% of its bacterial diversity. That means your grandparents, despite eating more processed food and having less access to organic produce, probably had healthier gut bacteria than you do right now. How is that possible? Because they weren't doing the 5 things I'm about to show you. Things that modern society has convinced us are normal, healthy, or even necessary. Let me be clear about something before we continue. I'm not here to sell you a probiotic supplement. I'm not promoting any product whatsoever. What I'm about to share with you is based on 15 years of research in gastroenterology and nutritional immunology. And every single claim I make is backed by peer-reviewed scientific literature that I will reference throughout this video. My name is Dr. William, and I've spent the last decade and a half studying the human microbiome, the gut-brain axis, and the relationship between intestinal bacteria and chronic disease. I completed my medical degree at Johns Hopkins, followed by a fellowship in gastroenterology and advanced training in nutritional immunology at Stanford Medical Center. For the past 8 years, I've been working specifically on how modern lifestyle habits are causing what researchers now call dysbiosis, the collapse of healthy bacterial ecosystems inside the human gut. And if you find this information valuable, if you want to protect yourself and understand what's really happening inside your body, hit the like button right now and leave a comment telling me where in the world you're watching this from. I read every single comment, and knowing where my viewers are located helps me understand what health information is reaching different parts of the world. So comment below, tell me your country or your city. Let's see how global this community really is. Now, let me show you the 5 habits that are killing your gut bacteria. And I promise you, by the time you reach habit number 5, you will never look at your daily routine the same way again. Habit number 1. Using antibacterial soap and hand sanitizer multiple times daily. I know what you're thinking. Wait, isn't killing bacteria the whole point? Isn't that protecting me from getting sick? And you're partially right. Killing dangerous pathogenic bacteria absolutely protects you from infection. But here's what nobody told you. Your skin is not a sterile barrier.
It's a living, breathing ecosystem covered in approximately 1 trillion bacteria per square centimeter. These bacteria don't just sit there. They actively communicate with your immune system, training it to recognize friend from foe. When you use antibacterial soap containing triclosan or triclocarban, chemicals found in over 2,000 consumer products, you don't just kill the bad bacteria, you kill everything. And here's where the problem gets worse. A study published in the journal Environmental Health Perspectives found that people who regularly use antibacterial products have significantly altered microbiomes, not just on their skin, but also inside their gut. How is that possible? Because every time you eat with your hands, every time you touch your face, you're transferring bacteria from your skin into your mouth and down into your digestive system. That's not a bad thing. That's actually essential for maintaining microbial diversity. But when your hands are constantly sterilized, you lose that natural bacterial transfer. Even more concerning, research from the University of California, San Diego discovered that triclosan, the active ingredient in most antibacterial soaps, directly disrupts the gut microbiome's ability to metabolize certain fats and carbohydrates, leading to metabolic dysfunction and increased fat storage. Translation: antibacterial soap might actually be making you gain weight by destroying the bacteria that help you process food efficiently. And it gets worse. A massive cohort study following 41,000 children from birth to age 18 found that children who grew up in households that regularly used antibacterial cleaning products had a 33% higher incidence of asthma and a 26% higher incidence of allergic rhinitis. Why? Because their immune systems never learned how to properly calibrate themselves. They never had sufficient exposure to the harmless environmental bacteria that train developing immune cells. Habit number 2, taking proton pump inhibitors for acid reflux. This is the one that gets me every single time because it's so widely prescribed, so commonly used, and so catastrophically damaging to your microbiome. If you've ever experienced heartburn or acid reflux, there's a good chance your doctor prescribed you a proton pump inhibitor, a PPI. Medications like omeprazole, esomeprazole, lansoprazole, these are some of the most commonly prescribed drugs in the entire world. In the United States alone, over 15 million people take PPIs every single day. Here's how they work. They shut down the proton pumps in your stomach that produce hydrochloric acid, dramatically reducing stomach acid production by up to 90%. And yes, that stops the burning sensation. It stops the reflux. But it also creates a biological catastrophe inside your digestive system. Your stomach acid exists for a reason. It's not a design flaw. It's not something your body produces by mistake. Stomach acid is your first line of defense against pathogenic bacteria entering your digestive system through food and water. It kills harmful microorganisms before they can reach your intestines. But when you suppress that acid with PPIs, you essentially open the floodgates. Suddenly, bacteria that should have been destroyed in your stomach are surviving and colonizing your small intestine, a part of your digestive tract that's supposed to have relatively low bacterial counts. This condition is called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and it's now reaching epidemic proportions. A landmark study published in Gut, one of the most prestigious gastroenterology journals in the world, followed 300,000 people taking PPIs for more than 5 years. What they found was genuinely disturbing. These people had a 44% increased risk of dementia, a 58% increased risk of chronic kidney disease, a 96% increased risk of C. difficile infection, and a 250% increased risk of developing stomach cancer. Not 25%, 250%. How does suppressing stomach acid lead to dementia? Through your microbiome. The bacteria living in your gut produce neurotransmitters, anti-inflammatory compounds, and metabolites that directly affect your brain through what scientists call the gut-brain axis. When you destroy that ecosystem, you cut off the communication highway between your intestines and your brain. Inflammation increases, neurotransmitter production drops, and your brain slowly begins to deteriorate. Habit number 3, drinking chlorinated tap water without filtering it. Water is life. We've been told to drink 8 glasses a day. We've been told that staying hydrated is one of the simplest and most effective things we can do for our health. And that's absolutely true, but only if the water you're drinking isn't actively destroying your internal ecosystem. Municipal water supplies in most developed countries are treated with chlorine or chloramine to kill dangerous bacteria like E. coli and prevent waterborne diseases like cholera and typhoid. And this has been one of the greatest public health achievements in human history. Chlorinated water has saved millions of lives. But here's the unintended consequence that nobody talks about. Chlorine doesn't distinguish between pathogenic bacteria in a water pipe and beneficial bacteria in your intestines. When you drink chlorinated water throughout the day, you are essentially consuming a low-dose antibiotic every single time you take a sip. A study conducted by the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences found that people who regularly consume chlorinated tap water without filtration have significantly reduced populations of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, two of the most important protective bacterial species in the human gut. These bacteria produce lactic acid, which lowers the pH of your colon and creates an environment where pathogenic bacteria cannot thrive. They also produce antimicrobial peptides that directly kill harmful microbes. When you lose them, you become vulnerable. Your risk of gastrointestinal infections skyrockets, your risk of inflammatory bowel disease increases, and your overall immune function weakens. But the damage doesn't stop there. Research published in Environmental Science and Technology discovered that chlorine byproducts, specifically trihalomethanes, accumulate in the gut lining and cause low-grade chronic inflammation. This inflammation disrupts the tight junctions between the cells lining your intestinal wall, causing what researchers call increased intestinal permeability, more commonly known as leaky gut syndrome. When your gut becomes leaky, partially digested food particles, bacterial fragments, and toxins that should stay inside your intestines start leaking into your bloodstream. Your immune system detects these foreign substances and goes into attack mode, triggering systemic inflammation throughout your entire body. This is now understood to be one of the primary mechanisms behind autoimmune diseases, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, and even clinical depression. Habit number 4. Eating emulsifiers and processed foods every single day. This one is insidious because these chemicals are hidden in foods that most people consider healthy. I'm not talking about obvious junk food like candy bars and soda. I'm talking about almond milk, Greek yogurt, protein bars, whole grain bread, salad dressing, and even some organic products that carry a health halo. Look at the ingredient label of almost any packaged food in your kitchen right now. Chances are you'll find one or more of these ingredients: carrageenan, polysorbate 80, carboxymethylcellulose, soy lecithin, or mono and diglycerides. These are emulsifiers, chemicals added to processed foods to improve texture, prevent separation, and extend shelf life, and they're in everything. Here's the problem. A groundbreaking study from Georgia State University, published in the journal Nature, exposed mice to dietary levels of emulsifiers comparable to what the average person consumes in a typical Western diet. Within just 12 weeks, these mice developed severe gut dysbiosis, chronic intestinal inflammation, and metabolic syndrome. Their gut bacteria literally changed from a healthy, diverse ecosystem into a disease-promoting, pro-inflammatory population. But the scariest part wasn't the changes in the mice. It was what happened next. The researchers took fecal samples from these emulsifier-fed mice and transplanted them into germ-free mice that had never been exposed to emulsifiers. And those mice, despite eating a clean diet, developed the exact same metabolic problems, the same inflammation, the same disease. The damaged microbiome was directly transmitting disease from one animal to another. This means that eating emulsifiers doesn't just temporarily irritate your gut, it fundamentally reprograms your bacterial ecosystem in a way that can persist for months or even years, and potentially even be passed on to others through close contact or shared environments. Further research in humans has now confirmed these findings. A clinical trial published in Gastroenterology showed that people who consumed high levels of dietary emulsifiers had increased intestinal permeability, elevated markers of systemic inflammation, and a significantly higher incidence of irritable bowel syndrome and inflammatory bowel disease. Habit number 5. excessive hygiene, and avoiding dirt. This is the one that surprises people the most, especially parents, especially people who pride themselves on keeping a clean home. We've been conditioned to believe that cleanliness equals health, that sterile environments protect us from disease. And while basic hygiene absolutely prevents infections, we've gone too far, way too far.
There's a reason why children who grow up on farms have significantly lower rates of asthma, allergies, and autoimmune diseases compared to children raised in urban apartments. It's called the hygiene hypothesis, and it's one of the most well-established principles in immunology. Your immune system needs exposure to dirt, to animals, to environmental bacteria in order to develop properly. When you obsessively sanitize every surface, when you prevent your children from playing in the dirt, when you wash every piece of fruit 3 times before eating it, you're not protecting your health. You're depriving your microbiome of the bacterial diversity it desperately needs to function. A massive study following 1,200 families across 7 countries found that households with the most stringent cleaning routines, those that use disinfectant sprays daily, had children with the least diverse gut microbiomes and the highest incidence of allergic diseases. The cleanest homes produce the sickest kids. Now let me tell you exactly what you should do instead. These are evidence-based, practical strategies that will protect and restore your microbiome starting today. Stop using antibacterial soap. Regular soap and water is just as effective at preventing illness and doesn't destroy your skin's protective bacterial ecosystem. If you're taking PPIs, work with your doctor to find alternatives like dietary modification, H2 blockers used short-term, or addressing the root cause of reflux rather than suppressing symptoms indefinitely. Filter your drinking water using a high-quality carbon filter that removes chlorine and chloramine while leaving beneficial minerals intact. Read ingredient labels obsessively and avoid products containing emulsifiers whenever possible.
Choose whole, unprocessed foods. Let your children play outside. Let them get dirty. Expose yourself to nature regularly. Garden without gloves. These aren't risky behaviors, they're essential health practices. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this information. Because the microbiome crisis we're facing isn't just affecting you, it's affecting everyone you care about. And prevention starts with knowledge. Thank you for watching. I'm Dr. William, and I'll see you in the next video where we discuss the 1 supplement that actually works for gut health and the 12 that are complete scams.